can we know? Matthew McCormick, writer of Immanuel Kant, Metaphysics, in 2005 in the peer-reviewed Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, stated that this is one of Immanuel Kant's most important quotes because it defines both the nature and purpose of philosophy. At its heart, it's really asking, do we really know what we think we know? Philosophy is all about going for that deeper understanding and not just settling for it just is. I'm here today to talk to you about Immanuel Kant and his biggest contribution to philosophy, the ethical theory of Kantianism. It's my hope that showing you this new theory will help you get a new perspective on things. I'll admit, I'm no super expert on philosophy, but I've taken my fair share of classes on the subject and also devoted some of my own personal time to exploring it. It's like a personal hobby of mine. I love philosophy. And I know there will be a lot of you who probably don't know much about philosophy, so my first topic will be a brief rundown of exactly what an ethical theory is and why Kantianism counts as one. Then I'll tell you about what Kantianism is all about, and explain to you the heart and soul of Kantianism, which is the categorical imperative. And finally, I'll explain both the strengths and weaknesses of this particular theory, not because I'm trying to convince you to follow it, I'm simply showing you a new theory so you can open your mind to the idea of philosophy and exactly what that entails. It'll be up to you if and how you pursue it. So what is ethics? There are all sorts of ways to go about defining it, but the official philosophy fancy pants version is basically the attempt to live a normal, moral life. So then you gotta ask yourself, what is moral? Well, Robert Johnson, writer of Kant's Moral Philosophy in 2008 from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, explains that moral philosophy asks what I ought to do. Simple as that, and yet it's not so simple. When you ask yourself, should I steal this piece of bologna? You're asking yourself a moral question. Most people want to make sure that their answer is an ethical one. So to recap, an ethical theory is basically an idea about how to arrive at this answer. Kantianism is an ethical theory because it describes in detail one of these many ideas. Some say that the ethical thing to do is whatever benefits the greater good. Some say that the ethical thing to do is something that appeals to a higher sense of justice, or even whatever benefits you yourself. Kantianism talks about duty, and that is our ethical way to go. Lawrence Hinman, writer of the 2008 book Ethics, A Pluralistic Approach to Moral Theory, which is basically a book looking at the good points and the bad points of a moral theory, quoted Kant in explaining Kantianism's main theory about ethics. An action has moral worth if it's done for the sake of duty, and its maxim can be willed by universal law. That statement boils down to Kant's categorical imperative. The categorical imperative is just a fancy name given to his ethical rule of thumb. This rule states that you should always act in such a way that the maxim behind your action can be willed as universal law. Now that's a lot to take in, so let me break down the terms there for better understanding. A maxim is just a rule. Literally, that's it. It's a rule about ethics. So for example, a maxim would be to never fart in public. As long as you don't break that rule, you're being ethical. So for this example, if you never fart in public, you're being ethical. And if you do, shame on you. However, you can't just create any old rule you want to. If you made the rule always kill people that piss you off, we'd have a very unpopulated planet. Therefore, in order for it to be a maxim, it must pass the test of universalizability. This means you have to get a little imaginative. You have to take the rule you've come up with and imagine, what would the world be like if everyone in the world followed this rule? If the answer that a logical line of thinking comes to is something that ends in either the apocalypse or a paradox, it's not an acceptable rule. The always kill people rule doesn't work because if everyone followed it, everyone would be dead, and that's the apocalypse. The trickier one is the lying example. Hinman explains that the rule, you can lie when it benefits you, does not pass the test of universalizability because if everyone in the world did so, Everyone would expect a lie, and so lying would lose its effectiveness due to no one trusting anyone anymore. It's not exactly a paradox, but you get the point. You couldn't will that everyone do that, or otherwise your lying would become a moot point. However, if you willed that everyone in the world never farted in public again, the world would be a much more fragrant place. And there wouldn't be any apocalypses, so it passes the test. So to recap, Kant wants you to act in a way that you could always will the maxim behind your action to be willed as universal law, which means he wants you to act in such a way that the rules you're using to guide your actions wouldn't be stupid or kill everyone on the planet. If everyone in the world also followed that rule and it was good, then it's a good rule. That is the theory of Kantianism. So what are the good points and the bad points of the categorical imperative? Most people like it better than other theories because it provides a quicker alternative. Most of the ethical theories require you to make on-the-spot calculations and judgments based on whatever particular belief system that theory holds. In this theory, once a rule or maxim has been put in place, you can always refer to it in a time of need, so you can respond quickly to ethical problems. It keeps things simple and keeps things manageable, something that's very helpful in the world of philosophy. There are also downsides to this theory, most being pointed out during an example that shows you when you get into the tricky situation of something like, say, lying to Nazis to protect the whereabouts of Jewish fugitives. If you've already decided to follow the rule, never lie, then in this situation you would have to give up the location of the Jews. But then, if everyone followed this rule, everyone would give up the Jews' locations and that would result in mass murder. Now this is neither an apocalypse, nor a paradox, or a broken rule. It's just a rule that gets people killed. To most this screams wrong, yet the categorical imperative still says it's okay. To get around this bad feeling, most would then edit their rule. Change it to something like, never lie unless it's in the interest of saving lives. This may seem like a good fix, since it too fits the categorical imperative, and it sits better with our moral intuition. However, this opens the door to a very complicated process of determining rules. In order for a rule to be truly universal, it must take into account all possible exceptions to it, and then try to include them into the rule. This is no easy process, and it could be argued that for many ethical problems, this is an impossible task. Every moral theory has complications, however. But even if the theory is wrong, that doesn't mean you shouldn't still examine it. My point, once again, was not to persuade anyone of anything, but to simply show you an idea, a theory, and let your brain munch on it for a while. In summary, Kantianism is an ethical theory that lives on the categorical imperative, and it has its good and bad points, but whether or not it's a good rule to use is up to you to decide. Just remember, next time when you have to make a choice, think about how you're making that decision, because it just might change it.